Keir Starmer, the UK's authoritarian Prime Minister who hates one sector of the population, a sector of the population concerned about uncontrolled immigration and an illegal invasion of our border, well, he keeps insisting that it's just a figment of our imagination that the UK is now beset by two-tier justice. And then we keep getting reminded that he's nothing more than a liar. Remember Josh Greeley? The 28-year-old leftist activist who attacked Nigel Farage on the campaign trail as he toured on a bus of Barnsley? Well, breaking right now, Greeley has just escaped jail for that brazen attack on our democracy, attempting to shut down opposition by using violence. He was sentenced to 6 weeks in jail, but wait for it, that sentence was suspended for 12 months, even though the district judge said the crime merited time behind bars. Surely, if there was ever an opportunity to prove to the British public that attacks on controversial Conservative politicians are not acceptable, especially after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, then this was the moment. But no, because we all know two-tier justice is now prevalent. So as the scumbag Greeley is set free, he will not spend a day in prison. Julie Sweeney languishes behind bars. You'll remember her, 53-year-old from Kidsgrove. She lived a quiet, sheltered life in Cheshire, primary caregiver to her ill husband, grandmother of 3. She made an inappropriate comment on Facebook in the wake of the Southport massacre that she instantly regretted and tried to delete. Also languishing behind bars, David Spring, the 61-year-old former train driver from Sutton who had never been in trouble with the law once in his life but confronted the police at a protest outside Downing Street, even though footage shows he did absolutely nothing violent. And there's Sellafield worker Lee Joseph Dunn. This guy's in prison. Guess what for? Sharing 3 memes. Not to mention the 67-year-old pensioner David Notley of Essex. He's behind bars for 20 months for shouting, "You're not English anymore," at police officers. Now, ironically, it was Farage himself who was calling out this sort of two-tier justice just last night.
Is that why 147,000 people in the last year have been given community resolutions, which means nothing will appear on their police records? That includes offences such as minor sex crimes, violence, and possession of weapons such as knives. Oh, and by the way, if you want to go shoplifting, that's absolutely fine. Unless you nick 200 quid's worth, we won't even bother to have a look. And whilst he's getting tough on violent disorder on our streets, well, Prime Minister, what about the 61 police officers that were assaulted over the weekend at the Notting Hill Carnival? That's nothing to say of many of the other things that went wrong during that so-called festival.
And we know every day now brings a new criminal horror. One of these people set free or let loose, seemingly for political reasons, why white working class folk are made examples of. How about the story of Mohammed Hassan? This scumbag berated 3 women, calling them prostitutes, for not wearing traditional Asian dress and putting on makeup. He then violently attacked them at a petrol station in Bradford. But the 26-year-old also escaped jail after receiving a suspended sentence. Meanwhile, Stephen Silverman has reminded us all, he's the guy from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, that police have still not tracked down the man who wore that Hamas 7 football shirt. Watch.
Well, it is quite remarkable. And look, there's a general point here on which one would hope the overwhelming majority of people would agree, which is that inciting hatred of any minority is completely unacceptable anywhere, let alone in a civilized democracy.
Yeah.
Be it on race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, gender preference, threatening or actually carrying out acts of violence against any minority is despicable.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely right that people who engage in that kind of behaviour should feel the full force of the law. The problem is that for the last 10 months, and especially in London, we have been watching a double standard being applied, whereby one form of extremism is clamped down on with an iron fist, while another is treated with an unacceptable level of leniency. Now, the result of that is that through any lack of real deterrence through policing, a climate has been allowed to develop that is permissive with regard to expressions of hatred directed not just at Jewish people, but at Britain as well, and at the liberal democratic values we all rely on to keep us safe.
He's completely true. I think it's really horrifying, and it was a really good point to make. But of course, we have also seen the MSM and political establishment, as Nigel Farage mentioned, tried to ignore the Notting Hill Carnival carnage over the past 2 days, which saw, according to latest tallies, 334 arrests, up from 275 last year, including crimes like 3 life-threatening knife attacks and 5 more stabbings. So it was Jeremy Kyle who's actually, I think, summed up those double standards perfectly.
Here's what I don't get. 330 people were arrested. There were 8 stabbings. 3 people are fighting for their lives. And over 70 police officers, men and women, were stabbed, attacked, assaulted, whatever. And not one sign of Starmer's militia on the streets of Notting Hill. Now, everybody who watches and listens to this station knows what I'm talking about. Is that what we've come to? Because that is 2-tier goddamn policing. Why were those 330 not dragged from their beds this morning on Sky and every other television network so that the country knows that that sort of behaviour in the streets is not allowed? Or is it only if you're from the right? Here's what I don't get.
Good question. I don't get it either. Is it only if you're from the right that authorities will take action after staunch political pressure? Sadly, Jeremy, yes, absolutely. And meanwhile, life in lawless Britain grows worse by the day as real criminals fear absolutely no justice whatsoever. I mean, look at the front of this young thief.
Leave it alone.
What?
Leave it alone. Walk away. Does anyone call the police then? Do you want to stop him? Nicking a bike.
He just didn't give a damn. And last night there were gunshots in Enfield, North London.
So right. You so right. You were so right. They killed him. Call the police. Call the police. Give me my phone. Give me my phone. Give me my phone. Let me call the police. He's dead. He's running. He's running. Call the police. Call the police. Call the police. So.
It's unbelievable. But then you think that according to the authorities, they're really going to crack down on so-called hate crimes, right? Rather than those sorts of violent crimes. However, there's been no outrage over the very obvious hate crime, the anti-no white graffiti that's popped up in Birmingham. And as Colin Brazier put it, there is a modern dogma which exists where white people can only perpetrate racism while never being its victim. Almost everyone, regardless of skin colour, knows this to be a fallacy. In coming years, this critical race theory will be tested to destruction. And that's absolutely true. Although I would say right now, it's the 2-tier policing and the 2-tier justice in this 2-tier society that's going to destroy whatever social cohesion we had left first. But now, let me bring in today's outsider. and to discuss what is going on in lawless Britain, two-tier UK. I'm delighted to be joined by the Conservative commentator, my friend, Father Calvin Robertson, host of the Fox and Father podcast and the Common Sense Crusade on Lotus Eaters. Calvin, lots to discuss today, but can I get your reaction first to the attacker who targeted Nigel Farage escaping jail, even though the district court judge said that the crime warranted jail time?
It's absolutely outrageous. Anyone attacking anyone else in politics should be arrested straight away, because we have to have a safe place for people to stand for election and to represent constituents. And the moment we resort to violence, we lose the democratic argument, and therefore we are removing ourselves from democracy. This young man who threw these concrete bricks at Nigel Farage should be in jail, should be in prison for what he did. It's outrageous that a violent action like that with serious intent to cause harm has been suspended and let off at the same time as all of these people that are getting arrested for social media comments, whether it's hurty words on Facebook or misinformation on Twitter. There's a clear message being sent by our police, by our judiciary, by our politicians, and that is violence is acceptable, but hurty words are not. And we've seen this. There have been headlines. There was one in the Telegraph just this week. Violent offenders let off if they apologize, not charged by the police if they apologize. There's a similar headline to one I saw in March as well. So it's not even a Labour thing. It's just the establishment doesn't seem to want to deal with violent criminals. And that's people who are hurting people and sexually offending against people. These are serious concerns that people doing these things should be removed from civilized society.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there are just so many examples of it now, Calvin. And of course, I think the Farage attacker is particularly shocking. I mean, by the way, he claims that he was only throwing coffee cups, not concrete. But to me, it doesn't matter, Calvin, because the issue is you don't know what's in those coffee cups. You don't know if those coffee cups are filled with battery acid, for example, which is what Jo Brand encouraged folk to throw at Nigel Farage, yet she received no sort of reprimand from the BBC. But the point is, Calvin, at a time when slippery Starmer, two-tier carers, quite clearly demanding of the justice system disproportionate sentences for white working class folk who took part in the so-called riots, surely this is also where he should be demanding the same sort of tough justice.
Absolutely. It is disproportionate. If Jo Brand incites violence by saying someone should throw acid at someone else, she should be arrested for that. But what we see is people are arrested for potentially inciting violence by using words that some may seem to be hateful or offensive. It doesn't actually make any logical sense. And of course, the situation we're seeing with the so-called far-right riots, which were actually mostly just ordinary working-class British people who are upset with the establishment, the situation we're seeing with them and the way they're treated versus anything else. And this past weekend, of course, we had Notting Hill Carnival. I used to live up the road from Carnival. I can account for the crimes that we saw being reported by the Metropolitan Police this week. But 230 plus arrests, 3 firearms recovered, over 5 stabbings, at least 2 people left in life-threatening condition in hospital. And that's just the start of it. At least 8 sexual offences, and that's just the people that report what's being done to them. And so how does Notting Hill Carnival get reported in the mainstream media and or by the police and or by our politicians? Diversity is our strength. This is a great multicultural element of British society. What? So on the one hand, white working class Brits express their disappointment with the establishment and they get called far-right thugs. On the other hand, predominantly black Afro-Caribbeans at Carnival caused mayhem. To me, that looked like a riot with the stabbings and the violence, the sexual assaults and guns being confiscated. And that's just, that's diversity. That's a good thing. How?
Well, with The Guardian, Calvin, The Guardian actually described the event on its front page as one big ball of happiness. Oh yeah, one big ball of happiness where you can be a mother with your daughter nearly stabbed to death. But Calvin, I was interested, we saw it in your post on X just a few moments ago. I was interested that you said that if the event was predominantly white working class Britons rather than immigrants, you think it would be condemned.
100%. And I say this as someone who's half white and half immigrant, that if the case was Notting Hill Carnival was predominantly white working class, the headlines on Sky TV, in The Guardian, on BBC would have been far-right thugs cause violence, sexual assault, found with serious firearms, stabbings left, right and centre. It would have been clamped down upon. The police would have been there storming it. They would have been rushed through the judicial system. They would have been rushed through the courts, sent to prison immediately. But because they happen to be mostly immigrants of African and Caribbean nature, there is a soft-gloved approach. And that doesn't make sense because people in this country want equality under the law. Both white people and Afro-Caribbean people want equality under the law. So why is the establishment and the mainstream media so against that? Well, it's because they make an idol of diversity. And they think if we treat people equally, then we're somehow racist or somehow going to cause a race riot. Actually, by not treating people equally is what's going to cause race riots.
But first, you know what's so important about being independent is I only ever tell you about products that I use and believe will really improve your life. So that's why I am delighted today to talk about Verso. So let me tell you about my story in regards to this product. I entered my 40s, decided to get very healthy after a stressful year, exercising, trying to sleep better, all of that type of stuff, and doing the 16/8 fast as well. But I researched and found that scientists like David Sinclair have proven we can now reverse aging with interventions that go beyond healthy habits. So I was looking for a product that I knew would enhance everything I was already doing, but one that was backed up by really solid evidence. That product is Cellbeing by Verso. It's scientifically proven to include ingredients that fight the effects of aging by increasing NAD+ levels, which is the stuff that powers every cell in your body. I've been taking the product for a number of months. At the start of my day, it's been genuinely transformative. Fasting is easier. I've lost fat. I'm eating less too. And the team at Verso tell me that it's due to its blood sugar regulation effects, which lead to fewer cravings. It's also really helped my sleep. Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced, so you're guaranteed that you're getting exactly what you paid for, which is really important. And I'm delighted to say that because Verso is my first ever sponsor here on Outspoken, the brilliant deal continues today. If you head right now to buy.ver.so/outspoken, you will save 15% on your first order. All you need to do is use the coupon code Outspoken where you check out. The link is in our show notes on YouTube and Rumble, so you can click directly from there, or I'll spell it out for you, buy.ver.so/outspoken, and use the coupon code Outspoken. Now look, I am of course completely horrified by the fact that Nigel's attacker got off, but I'd say I'm probably even more horrified by the fact that Mohammed Hassan has not been pictured anywhere, but this is the 26-year-old Calvin who assaulted 3 women at a petrol station in Bradford. Now, he was banged to rights, Calvin. The attack, which lasted for 51 seconds, was captured on CCTV. And according to the Daily Telegraph, and the details are so incredibly shocking, he grabbed the driver, slammed her head onto the dashboard of her vehicle. He then grabbed another woman's hair and punched her in the head before hitting the third woman. He did not go to jail, Calvin. He did not go to jail. And you know the reason that he attacked these women is because he said they were quote unquote prostitutes because they were not wearing traditional Asian dress and were wearing makeup. And this is the sort of ideology that we have decided to import into our country. And this guy walks free.
It is British culture that men do not hurt women. It is British values that men do not raise a hand to women because we see them as the fairer sex and we see that men are here to provide and protect for women. That has been the traditional sense in British values. Some other cultures have values where women are lesser than men and they can beat their women if they do not like what they see from their women. And that's what we've imported, people who share those values, unfortunately, that are directly contradictory to our own. And of course, if someone does break the law, if someone does break our values, they should be punished for that. There should be serious consequences for any man who raises a hand towards women. But to suggest that these women are prostitutes because they are dressed in what he deems to be inappropriate, we could have conversations about what appropriate dress for public is, but that's very different to selling your body for sex. It's just insulting, it's offensive, and it's downright un-British.
Of course, and guess what his sentence was, Calvin? 35 rehabilitation activities, 180 hours of unpaid work, electronic tagging for 4 months, and £500 costs. So that will deter absolutely no one. Meanwhile, Calvin, while all of this is going on, the invasion of the UK via the southern border continues. And again, you will not hear about this in the mainstream media today. Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, has posted on X 526 people crossed the channel yesterday. As I write, 11 boats are mid-channel, yet not a word from our Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Calvin, and I don't really take him seriously at all, but Tom Tugendhat, who is one of the people running for the Conservative Party leadership, has now finally admitted that the military needs to be sent in to tackle small boats. At the same time, we have Starmer, and I know as a Brexiteer like me, you'll be furious about this, in Germany, effectively trying to reverse Brexit by the back door. But he didn't acknowledge at all the fact that there is this fierce debate going on right now, Calvin, in Germany about migration after that fatal terrorist attack in Solingen, where someone who claims to be an ISIS terrorist, who was a illegal immigrant from Syria, knifed 3 innocent folk to death, stabbed multiple others. And finally, this has caused folk in Germany and politicians in Germany to suggest there is actually now a national emergency and that migration has to be restricted. But Starmer doesn't mention a word of it. He just says, oh, it was a terrible event. A terrible event. Well, there's so many of these terrible events, aren't there now, Calvin? No, this was an Islamist attack, and thank goodness politicians in Germany are finally taking it seriously.
Finally, but Germany have had this problem for a long time. They've been at the forefront of all of this, importing mass immigration from Mohammedan countries at their own behest, and the population has started to rise up against the politicians, which is why the politicians are finally addressing it. But we'll have to do similar over here. We have to make our voices heard, because you're right. Keir Starmer gave a very boring speech. He did not address the societal issues that everyone is facing in this country, or that most people are facing in this country. It seems the elite live in their own little bubble. And then I love those memes you've got on the screen. But it seems the elite are in their own little bubble, and they don't see the problems that the rest of us are facing. In that knife crime is up. In fact, all crime seems to be up in most of our major cities, to the point that, as you addressed in your monologue, we are seeing no whites graffitied on walls in major cities in Britain. For goodness sake, we had this in the reverse. 70 years ago, when we fought against it. We fought for equality, we fought for diversity in a true sense, and now it's all being undermined because we've gone too far the other way, and our politicians are afraid to address the matter. Even though Mohammedanism accounts for, or Islamism accounts for, the vast majority of terrorism in the West, our politicians are still too afraid to talk about it.
Well, of course, and let's be honest, Angela Merkel basically destroyed Germany by opening the doors to illegals. But what's really interesting to me is I'm looking closely at what's going on there, and you've got Friedrich Merz, who is the leader of the CDU, Calvin, but possibly the next chancellor of Germany, and it's not that long before an election there. And listen to what he's saying. And I think this is really instructive, actually. He wants Germany to declare a national emergency so that it can use national law to turn away asylum seekers at its borders, and says if that cannot be adhered to, then I am convinced we have the right to turn people back at Germany's external borders, even though, of course, they are a member of the European Union. So if that discussion is taking place in Germany, my goodness, it needs to take place here. But Keir Starmer doesn't even want to admit that there's an issue, that there's a problem, let alone talk about sending the military in.
Yeah, Keir Starmer's talking instead about rebuilding Britain together. What does that mean? It sounds awfully similar to Build Back Better, doesn't it? If he stopped destroying Britain, maybe we'd have something to rebuild together. But there is no together. There is a difference between the establishment of the politicians, the judiciary, the mainstream media, the police forces, versus the ordinary working class British folk. And whilst there is no party that looks after the ordinary working class British folk, there will never be a together. Unfortunately, we need to build that gap. And Keir Starmer is not the man to do it. I don't understand how he cannot see what's going on around him. In just under 2 months in office, he's caused more division than we saw even throughout COVID or Brexit. And so when he refuses to face up to these matters, the British people are going to get more and more upset, and we're going to see more and more civil unrest. Those riots that they managed to sigh up the end of a few weeks ago, they will come back.
Yeah. And the thing is, look, as I say, I don't take what Tom Tugendhat is saying seriously, because he had ample opportunity as a Conservative cabinet minister to lobby for this and quit if Rishi Sunak wouldn't do what he wanted. But I do think what he's saying is correct. And I think it's the first time I've heard it expressed in this way, Calvin. So Tugendhat has said that the UK's national security demands the same level of commitment that the Royal Navy showed in the fight against slavery almost 200 years ago. And that costs the equivalent of around £50 billion a year. And I agree. If it's going to cost that amount of money to secure our borders, then let's do it. But the issue is, Slippery Starmer doesn't want to secure the borders. He's made that abundantly clear. He wants to throw them open. And we're going to see migrants, and I'm going to talk about this more over the coming days, but we're effectively going to see migrants scattered all around the country. They are coming to your neighbourhood.
Well, indeed. And as for Tom Tugendhat, I really like him as a person. I don't always agree with his policies, but I do think he's a good man. And we need these people within the Conservatives to start speaking up on these issues. And thankfully, he is starting to get a bit bolder. And so maybe they'll all take some encouragement from that, because we do need to protect our borders. We are not a country without borders. Unless we define our borders, we are just a partisan globalist smush of everyone living everywhere. And that may be the future that some people want, but it's not the future that the majority of us want. And so when he talks about using the military to patrol our borders, I'm like, yes, please, let's have some of that. Of course, Keir Starmer is against it because he is a massive globalist himself, and he's already hinting at trying to rejoin some kind of relationship with the European Union, which is, of course, more federalism and more globalism, when the British public have made it very, very clear in one of the biggest mandates we've ever had in this country electorally that we do not want to be a part of the European Union. But when Keir Starmer is taking us one direction, hopefully the Conservative Party will start to wake up and say, no, we need to go in the other direction. But of course, words and rhetoric are one thing and actions are another. The Conservative Party has shown that they're very good sometimes at words or rhetoric, but they're not very good at following through with actions. Whereas the Labour Party are not very good with words. They upset everyone every time they speak, but they do follow through with their actions. When they say they're going to clamp down on people like you and I, that's what they do, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.